when you publish a book with a big press these days, you have to have a proposal, and it better be good. You hear about the elevator pitch and the log line and all these things that you front load your proposal with just to make it sound good. And the first sentence of my proposal, I think I can quote it by heart. I intend to write the first literary trans memoir for a mass reading audience. I figured any publisher wants to hear the words mass reading audience, and maybe they even want to hear the word trans memoir, because I don't know, maybe we're in fashion. But the word that mattered most to me was the word literary. And I thought I would just talk a little bit and read a little more, but just talk a little bit about what that word means. We often hear the word literary. As students, that's the kind of literature we read, literary books. Even if we took AP English from Mrs. Crabtree in high school, they want you to read literature, literary things. Here, it's good for you, like vitamins. But what does that word mean? Literary. And what I meant by literary, in my proposal and in my practice is maybe the opposite of what a lot of people think. When people think of literary, often they think of something lofty that maybe a professor would profess about, something that lends itself to a lot of theory and high-minded thoughts. My sense is it's the opposite. It's actually low, touching the earth, gritty, experiential. And when you look at great literature, the places where it comes from is the opposite of where professors live. No offense to professors. I've been one on and off. We have professors here. But the literature we study comes from, the earth, more often than not, the gutters, war, poverty, hell. When you think of, Dante's Inferno, here was a man writing who was exiled, and he was writing in the vernacular, the low, the greatest text in Italian literature. So the most frequent definition of what makes something literary versus what makes something, pop or genre or sellout or what have you, is that literary writing is character-driven versus plot-driven, whatever that means. And I think I mostly agree with that. Yeah, it's character-driven. You're going vertically deep into who a person is, what a person is, why a person does what they do, rather than horizontally of some vast plot, some huge wide thing like a video game where you kind of don't know anybody. They're just these cartoonish avatars standing for some principles, and there's some plot being enacted. However, I think there's more to it than just character driven. For me, the key to literary writing and what I want to do when I write is that it is embodied and that it is enacted, as opposed to something being summarized and theorized. It's not theory. It's not summary. It's the actual thing itself. It's what it is to be in a cab for the first time dressed as a woman. And, it's so embodied, in fact, that the time the cab ride took might be the time it takes to read that paragraph. What would I be thinking about in a cab? What would that experience be? And what would be the experience of the reader reading it? How can I get the reader with the character living? Very gritty, very experiential. The great writer George Saunders has this metaphor of a sidecar. The old motorcycles, like the Batman motorcycles. Robin was always riding in the sidecar. And he says a good narrator for George Saunders keeps that reader close in the sidecar, so that when you turn, they turn. What you see, they see. You feel a bump, they feel a bump. If the sidecar is not attached closely enough, then they won't turn with you. They won't be with you. So embodied and enacted, anything but lofty or theoretical or what have you, very gritty, very experiential. And I just didn't find a lot of that happening in a lot of the classics of trans writing we had. Anyhow, with that in mind, well, one other point. So character versus plot, character driven, not plot driven, embodied and enacted, not summarized or theorized. And the third thing is, I'll just say, the story does the thinking. We hear about outlining and planning and what have you. For me, literary writing is the opposite. D.H. Lawrence says in one of his great essays on American literature, trust the tale, not the teller. The story is different from me, and the story I feel is smarter than me. When I write a poem, I hope the poem is smarter than me, and I have to let the story do the thinking. And what I often did in these chapters is the only plot I did was to pick a moment or two to start with, and I tried to let the moment point me to the next moment rather than my planning pointing me. And in the act of writing a moment, it would reveal its wisdom or not. Maybe that moment wouldn't wind up in the final draft. So the story does the thinking.